Welcome to Behind the Page, the Eli Marks podcast, with your hosts, John Gaspard and me, Jim Cunningham.
Hey there, Jim.
Yano, you sound perfect.
Yeah, anyone listening closely the last few times was like, what's going on with John? I don't want to name any names, but there's a cat that knocked the microphone on the floor a while back, and I don't know if the problem's entirely solved, but it's closer to being solved than it was. So, his name's Winslow, and he is the devil, but he's also really cute. So
We each have our crosses to bear.
yes,
Yours is a cat. I have a Jack Russell Terrier.
yes. Well, and he's an excellent mouser. He's a mouser with a bell, and he's still an
Really?
excellent mouser.
And
Yeah.
it still makes it.
He still makes it work. Anyway, let's get down to business here.
Sorry,
What
I
is
let us
this?
off track.
This is season 5, episode 3. We're on the 3rd episode of this brand new season. And today we have double fun. We have a magician named Star Newman, and joining her is our old pal Tyler Erickson. And it sort of fell into place this way. I was supposed to see Star at our friend Matt Dunn's theater. I couldn't make it, but she looked intriguing, and then she moved out of town. I've sort of been following her on social media, and we got to chatting back and forth about it. Love to have her on. And she just said in passing, well, I could do that day, but I'm meeting with my teacher online right after that, Tyler Erickson. I said, oh, you still use Tyler? She said, yeah, I can't exist without Tyler, even though
Nice.
she is essentially a professional magician now. And I thought, well, that's fascinating. Let's get the two of them together and with the two of us, and we will sit down and chat about the student-teacher relationship. So we met Star and Tyler via Zoom. Tyler kind of sat quietly for a while. He'll pop up later in the interview. He was a good listener. And we quickly found out that for one of us, this was actually not the first meeting.
Star, it is a pleasure to meet you.
I met you.
You did?
Yes, and I adore your dog, Winston.
Oh,
Yeah, but I met you at my first Copperfield show in like 96 with Shay Weinblatt. You were sitting in front of us.
wow. So how you must have been a kid.
I know it was 96 because I drove there and I was just learning how to drive and I had to take a highway. So I was like 16.
Ah, that's awesome. Nice to have you both here, Tyler. Always a pleasure to see you, my friend. Star, let me just start with you. Now, your background includes studying theater at the university. How'd you really transition from theater to magic? And when did you realize that magic was going to be your primary focus?
I was always involved with theater. And when I found magic when I was 12, I got a little bit out of theater and really just dove in to the magic. But during college, I knew that I wanted to have a degree to fall back on, but also I wanted to get the best one that I thought at the time would be possible to help the magic. So I was a general theater major and I got to study playwriting and I got to study prop design and prop making as well as the onstage things. And that once I finished that, I was going to be a playwright that was going to change the world. And I joined Minneapolis Playwright Center
Sure.
for a hot minute. And then I realized you can't make a lot of money with that. It's very difficult to make a living. So I went back into magic and also at the same time, for a long time in Minneapolis, did prop design for plays at like the Park Square Theater and places like that.
Yeah, now Park Square, I was just there last Saturday night to see a show, and it was fantastic. I did a show at Park Square when I first was getting started, so in the early 80s. What a great theater that is for us here in the Twin Cities. Talk a little bit about how your experience in stage management and prop design at Park Square and maybe some other theaters that I'm unaware of. How did that really contribute then to your magic career?
I think it encouraged me to have the ability to find things that I liked, objects that I liked, or for as far as the playwriting goes, subjects that I wanted to bring into the magic. And it gave me the tools to how to build, where to find a prop, how to change it in order to attach part A to part B and make it move. So it gave me the technical ability to do that, and also the aesthetics of what the audience sees, because there is a difference between what is, say, correct for the period and what the audience thinks is correct for the period, and making the choices to let them live in a world where they still think that that's period and they think that the show makes sense, or change their opinion. So
I like all of that. Look, what drew you to mentalism? Because I know that that's a focus for you, and why'd you decide to incorporate it into your act alongside traditional magic?
I think it has a greater ability to be interactive and really take what the audience is saying to you and respond to it in a way that people don't get when they're watching television or watching a spectacle like circus. It has so much more back and forth. I like that. I kind of think it's stronger oftentimes because people are more willing to believe that maybe you get a sense of them. And personally, I'm an awfully empathetic person. So I feel like if I were to have like an actual power, it would be feeling people. And that helps me at least with the delivery, but maybe a little bit with the actual getting things right.
Yeah, I would think that that's probably true. The more empathetic you are, the more maybe tuned in to what your audience is experiencing, and you probably can make some judgment calls, if you will, that further the magic. You studied theater. You worked as a playwright. You worked as an actress. How did all of that theatrical background um, enhance or change your performance as a magician and as a mentalist?
I will start with one of the things that I didn't like about theater was following a script, but being on stage as an actress helped me feel very comfortable on stage because I had a script that I could trust. But then when I was bringing that into the magic, I had the extreme comfort on stage, but I had the ability to be present in the room and react to things that are going on during that specific show. And I think it makes it a more personalized show. So I got the confidence from the acting, but then left that a little bit to go to the magic.
I like that. Confidence is so important on stage in front of an audience, isn't it? So let's talk a little bit about your experience on Penn and Teller. I thought you were spectacular. Tell us about that experience. How did you prepare for it? Was our friend Tyler involved in that?
So Tyler has been involved with that trick. I remember us sitting at Chipotle in West St. Paul and having the idea. We knew that I was just physically very good at the putting the hand on the floor and twisting it illusion upon which it's based. And we wanted to find a way to bring it up visually in front of the audience so that my hand was facing the audience. And kind of, we call it co-creation. We both at the same time hit on the idea of having the piece of plexiglass so people can see from the audience the hand actually turning. So that trick has been in my show for 20 years, perhaps.
Wow. Oh,
Yes. And I had sent it to Penn and Teller. And the first year I sent it, Lincoln wrote back and said he loved it. It was amazing. Could I add something else to it? Because, well, they did make me prove, like using Michael Close, one of their magic consultant that I worked with. They made me prove that it did actually have magic and it wasn't contortion. And so we successfully proved that, but they were still worried that it looked too contortiony and wanted me to add a trick. And we didn't hit. I suggested the one that I ended up doing before I do the arm twisting trick with a box, and it got kind of brushed away. And then the next year I sent them back another idea. I think that was the trisector. No, they had sent me the trisector and said, could you do this, the arm trisector? And I said, only if I can find a legal like ethical copy of or ethical version of it to use. I don't want to use a copy, but I have a friend, Matt Dunn, who I know you guys just visited, who had made one for just a display, and I used that to perform for them, and they didn't like it. So we, and then I think the next year I didn't send anything. And then the year that I ended up being on it, Lincoln called me and said, "Hey, we still like that arm thing. Can we let's take another look at this?" And we went back to the original idea of putting the arm in the box first and doing the sort of head twister thing before I do the trick.
And
So
it's a really charming, wonderful routine. And I know Penn and Teller had plenty of experience in order to understand what was going on. But for the general audience, I always listened to their responses, and there were so many that had to feel just great as a
it really
performer.
did. And seeing Allison's face too, Allison's reaction to it, and seeing Teller, though not verbally react, seeing his faces as well, that was amazing.
People go on Penn and Teller for one of two major reasons, and I think audiences very often think it's only the one. It's the obvious one. It's to try and fool Penn and Teller. But the truth is, a great many people go on knowing full well that Penn and Teller are not going to be fooled, but it will be delightfully entertaining, and it will act as a springboard for them. It'll act as a commercial for them, raising public awareness. And I think we all know that Star's performance was never designed to fool Penn and Teller. It was just meant to put her in front of them and for them to go, wow, that's entertainment. That's exactly the kind of thing we would want to see. And so when people say, oh, you're on Penn and Teller, did you fool them? It might be missing the point of why you were there in the first place.
Yeah. I think they deserve a lot of credit when we talk about the future of magic. They deserve a lot of credit because of that show in sort of showing America that this is a wildly entertaining art form when it's done well. We're just there's so many uncles and grandfathers that are doing magic at birthday parties not well, that's the concept many people have. Oh, it's that thing that my Uncle Ed does. And then when you see Star or any of the other people on Penn and Teller, it's like, wow, this is really fantastic fun. And so I really give them a lot of credit for the sort of renaissance magic is going through right now, because they're showing it to people. And because of that, people are now having an appetite. And when somebody says, there's a magician in town, coming to town I think more people now are likely to go, oh, I'd go to that. I'd like to see that. I think that'd be fun. Where before, I think maybe people would have gone, yeah, not for me so much.
They really have. And in addition to the variety of what they do and the types of performances that they do, exponentially they have showcased the variety of different races and different genders and different ages of people who are putting amazing things on stage.
Yeah, I agree completely that's sort of the palette that they exhibit of magicians of every race, creed, color, sex. It's fantastic, because especially, and I hesitate if we're recording to say this, but it is great for me to see Star or Suzanne or some of the other female magicians on Penn and Teller, because it's just like, that's just fantastic for me. And I think for an audience, just to see a different look, get a different feel for magic coming from a different place. And it opens the door for, a 12-year-old girl who's watching the show going, I never thought that, I never saw myself that way, but maybe I could do this. And I just think it's great. And so I'm a huge fan of theirs for many reasons, but not the least of which is they're showcasing magic at its best, and that's giving legs up to everybody who's doing good magic. Yeah, what a great experience. Congratulations. Not not everybody gets a chance to perform on that large a scale. So good for you. Star, how did you first connect with Tyler? And how long ago was that?
Wow. I want to, I'm totally aging myself, but I want to say it was about 31 years ago.
So it was right after you were born then.
Bless you. So I was 14 and I started working at the magic store, the Twin Cities Magic and Costume.
Ah, okay.
He was also working there. And during the first few years, I didn't know him very much. We just kind of saw each other in passing and didn't react that much to each other. And then I went away to college in California, and when I came back, started working at the magic store again, and he was much more present and would give me tips and things. And then this is a little personal, but I was having a very bad day and I was very sad. And he took out a box of stuff and he gave me three identical objects and he said, do something with that. And he just took my mind off of what I was thinking about, and we just slid into working together.
And so, at what point did that become sort of um, more formal rather than coworkers who are sharing some lunches and ideas together? When did it become more, hey, can we work together? Can you help me, as Tyler does for so many, including me, make my magic better?
I would say around that time, just a few years into being back, like 2 years into being back from Minnesota, it became close to a once a week or once every other week situation. We didn't our focus has definitely changed over the years that we've been working together, from stage shows that I was presenting to recently we've been working on more of my close-up fundamental skills, because maybe I loved the presentation of it and had gone pretty easy on my physical ability to do sleights. So he kind of decided it was time for me to start doing sleights. And then now a lot of our focus is on finding the right pieces for it. So over the years, and then now I've moved to Florida and we meet via Zoom, although I did spend a month in Minnesota last year and got to meet with him in person, which is awesome. But we meet via Zoom, and it's very about half sleights and fundamentals and body blocking when you're performing and all the things that he is amazing at, and half making sure that everything that I do is a reflection of who I am specifically.
He is an amazing performer and an incredible teacher. Tyler, talk to me about your memories, your first encounters with Star. What do you remember about that?
Well, first of all of that's lies. Just making up my so yeah, that pretty much tracks. I think that I might say that we started off talking about close-up, sleight of hand kind of things, because at the time that was most of what I was focused on and most of what I was teaching. And so the three identical objects is, if I remember correctly, I had a shoebox just full of what looks like junk. It looks like a junk drawer. And put that in front of a magician and say, can you do anything with what's inside of here? And a lot of times the answer is no. But with only a moderate amount of training, you start to realize, boy, the things that are in this box, while they're not traditionally used for magic, there's no reason they couldn't be. And so you start learning in what I tend to call templates. So because you originally learned this with, let's say, little pieces of sponge, there's no reason you couldn't do it with rolled up pieces of paper or this or that kind of thing. So that's where we first started working together. And then I did not have much of a background in stage magic, so my advice for the stage was rather limited. And so that's why most of our upfront conversations, that they would definitely follow the idea of being true to yourself, or what do you want to talk about and how do you want to be seen by the audience, but it didn't have the specificity. So when Star left, then there's the big gap. I had more time to work with more people and get a better sense of how to train and design shows for the stage. So by the time that she and I started talking again, I was now in a much better position to start talking about how to develop those kinds of things.
Now, Star, you talked about some of the work you have done with Tyler. I want to revisit that for a second. Just talk to me about the kinds, because I know what I bring to Tyler when I have an issue. What kind of things are you bringing to him? What kind of issues are you talking to Tyler about?
Presently, I'm trying to find the line between too much exposition in what I want to present and finding the subtext within it. And he's very helpful in telling me when I'm talking too much and when I can show, whether it's with the props that I'm using or the actions that I'm making with them, how to show the subtext rather than exposition on what I want to tell them. That's a big part of what we do.
Yeah. Tyler, talk about how you see your role in working with a magician like Star.
Well, we do talk about how to convert as much text, as much talking into action as we can. Like, does this need to be said? Is it possible that this can be an expression? Is it possible that people already get it and this is redundant information? And so if I was going to tweak this just a little bit, for sure we're doing that, but I think more often we're talking about branding. And one of the metrics that I use is I say, if someone else took and did exactly what you are doing, they took the same props and used the same words, would it work just as well? Because if that's true, if just any random magician can do it, then you have not personalized this enough. There's always supposed to be something there that if someone else were saying it or doing it, it would feel somehow inauthentic or forced or fraudulent. And so we're always trying to make decisions about material and say, for a lot of magicians in a show, they start with and end with, is it a good trick? If the trick fools people, we're done, and our starting spot is, well, of course it fools people, and of course it's a good trick, but that's not enough. Is it right for you? Are you getting the images out there that you want? Are you getting the topic out there that you want? Are you getting the interaction? Sometimes the whole point of a piece is that it just allows you to showcase a certain skill that you have. Maybe, like, I always think about Lance Burton. This is one of my favorite things to ever bring up, is like when you see Lance Burton in his stand-up show, he's just amazing. Cards are appearing, birds are appearing, very suave and everything. But you'd have no idea how good he is with kids unless he puts kids on stage with him. So yes, he gets a trick, or he has a trick where he produces a bunch of eggs from a hat and then a chicken, and it's amazing. But that's not the point. The point is we get to see him with those kids on stage, and that's another facet of his personality. So we spend a lot of time kind of looking for those things, how to expose hidden talents or understandings.
Jim, what sort of issues have you brought to Tyler, and how does that relationship work?
I went to Tyler initially to learn a cups and balls routine, and I'm still so interested in that as a trick for me and for myself, and a chop cup routine. And so I will revisit those things. But I have hired Tyler specifically to work with me on pieces for the Halloween show that I do. We worked on spoon bending together, and we worked on Boave together, and Tyler, like Star, in getting your hand up on a piece of plexiglass, had me move the Boave cards up so the audience could see it, which was such a simple thing, but I may never have thought of that myself. So, and I'm just starting work on a new show where the focus is Charles Dickens, who was an amateur magician, and I have hired Tyler to work with me to come up with some things that may fit nicely and feel, as Star mentioned, while they may not be period, I want them to look and feel period. And so Tyler and I are just about to start that adventure together, if that makes sense, John.
It does. It does. I'm wondering, Star, can you think back on your history with Tyler? Was there something you brought to him that was just the bane of your existence, and he Tylerized it and made it work? Do you know what I mean?
Has there been something that I couldn't do and really, really wanted to add to the show or add to my skill set? And A little bit the opposite, and I'm grateful for it, is I had very basic sleight of hand skills with cards and with small object manipulation when we started, and it wasn't something I wanted to learn. But once he taught me a trick it was a trick where coins move from one hand to another hand one at a time, and I had to do several different sleights during the trick, and I saw the reaction to it and I got comfortable with it. I found the power that having proper sleight of hand training can, the game changer that it can be for performing for audiences.
Tyler, in your relationship with other ongoing students or collaborators like Star or like me, what are the most common issues that come up and that you work with folks on? Maybe take me out of the mix because I'm a very streamlined, specific kind of, but for your normal students that you work with all the time, what's the big issue or what's the thing that you spend the most time talking about?
Well, the first thing that's worth doing is recognizing that there's at least two pools that people can fall into. And I'd say you and Star both fall into one side where you're both very good theatrically. You could step onto a stage having no show and no script. If you just had to stand up in front of a group of people, you have an automatic calm and charisma that works for you. And for people that have that just automatically there, a lot of times you're helping them, coaching them in different ways than you do with people who are not automatically good on stage. I would consider myself one of those people who I have a good enough voice and I'm very comfortable in what I'm saying, but I don't have the physicality and the charisma that tends to hold the stage as well as any of the number of people that I've worked with. So, in a sense, I'm always like, so jealous because just like little shining, effervescent people on stage. But so then it becomes just like Star said, if you have the ability to just step out and talk and people will just listen, you might lean into that and just start talking and saying all sorts of things. And so you have to dial that in and say, no, now we really need to reserve things because this is the ongoing battle is when you're good at something, it's easy to ride on your momentum and to not actually have to design because, hey, you can just freewheel it and you're going to already be doing pretty well. And for people who don't have any of that, then giving them just a fundamental understanding of a very basic script. And oftentimes, I'd like to come at it through close-up because close-up demands less of you on a presentational angle. People are much more conversational. You can say all but nothing or just kind of go off of their own reactions, which is why close-up entertainers, when they try to transition to the stage, often have no sea legs because for however much time they've spent doing magic close-up, they've spent no time with the actual specifics of scripting and the blocking and all of the other theatrical elements that matters so much more when you're kind of on your own up there on the stage.
So, Tyler, what's the number one thing that you and other teachers encounter in teaching magic or teaching anything else for that matter?
I would say the number one problem that teachers encounter is you realize that what feels so obvious to you is not obvious to them. Just anytime it's your field of expertise and someone's stepping into it, I read an article and saying nothing is obvious. And it's like, yeah, it's a pretty good. So you figure out where they are and then what is the most logical next step. And as far as how do you determine how much material someone can handle, it's very much like an appetite, right? Like I'll put a certain amount of food in front of someone and then I see how much they eat. And if they eat it all and they're still looking hungry, then it wasn't enough. If they barely eat, that was too much. And so there have been countless times where I have put things in front of someone and we've started working on it, and then I go, this is too, it's either too hard or it's too many steps or there's something about it. And I let it fade. We'll just pretend like that one never got brought up and we'll just bring it back down to here. And people also go through cycles where it's sometimes for whatever reason, everything is coming easy and they're going, and then they'll hit a slump and now it's a fight. I suppose it's very similar to writer's block or any other thing where you've just got your heart streaks. And so as a coach or a mentor or as a consultant, whatever the role is, it is to remind people that this is what it is to be human and that if you were a machine, every day would have a predictable amount of input output, but that's not who we are. So given all the different things that can be happening in your life, you may be in a great position to absorb material, or maybe not at all.
So, Tyler, what have you learned from your own magic, from all the teaching you've done?
Ah, what a fantastic question. I have learned countless things. So I've been teaching for a long time, and one of my favorite things is to get someone who's been a student of mine to start teaching on their own. Because if you think about it, if you've been doing one-on-one classes, there's this imbalance, right? There's everything that I know, and then the person on the other side does not have that to draw from. So the hierarchy is, I'm sitting on this mountain and they are at the bottom shouting up like, what do I do? And once they've got some level of ability, if they've worked professionally, I say, pick up a student, get somebody who's right at the beginning and start walking them through the fundamentals. And you're going to discover two things. First of all, you're going to realize just how much you know, because it's so easy to forget. When we're talking, there's this commonality, the shorthand that comes into play because I know and you know because I told you. So that's what it is. As soon as you take it outside and start talking to someone else, you're reminded of, oh no, this isn't common knowledge. And it's empowering. And secondarily, you'll be talking about something you feel like you really understand, and they will ask you the most basic question, and you'll realize it lands in that empty hole where you don't know the answer, and you go, oh my God, how do I not know why we do this or how this happens or anything? And so you go off and you seek out the answer, whether you have to go to your books or you go to your upstream person, which would be me. But that's what it was for me. When I was teaching, I would get asked a question and realize I didn't know the answer, and then I would go seeking. And if I didn't teach, I could have been a fine performing magician, but I would be nothing like what I am now, simply for having had to encounter these dark spots that never would have needed to be filled as a performer. But when you're teaching, you do need an answer. And a lot of times the answer is, I don't know, let me get back to you.
I've got one just about value. I can guesstimate based on my own experience with you, but I want you both just to talk about the value of an ongoing teaching relationship that you share. What has it brought to both of you? Star, let's just from your perspective, and then Tyler, I'm going to have you weigh in on that too.
I think over the years, Tyler has gotten a really good sense of my own fears and hesitations and personal psychological blocks on things. We discovered early on that I somewhat felt bad fooling people, not fooling people, but I always wanted to be nice about how I did magic, and a way to still do strong magic that's very fooling, but be the nice, kind person, not the haha I got you person. So he was able to take that fear and strengthen my magic with it, but still helping me maintain truth to myself. And truly, he knows me better than most people in my life. So if I have a question about rates, like my rates that I charge, he'll know why I'm worried about what I'm charging and be able to speak to me in a way that I understand what I'm offering. So I think those are two big fears that he used, and because he knew me over the years, to be able to get me past those blocks.
So those are great, and not something that I think I would have. It was just, those are so interesting and specific, rather than, well, it's the French drop was something I struggled with. You know what I mean? I mean, it's that. So that triggered something.
Oh, did you mean physically? Like what?
No.
Oh.
I think your answer was terrific. But what I'm saying is, it's a really cool answer, because I was expecting, well, it was this move that, and so it's great. And Tyler, from your perspective, what is this ongoing relationship brought to you as a teacher and a person and a performer?
Well, to build off of what Star said, if I'm working with anybody over a good deal of time, I consider it almost critical that I know something about them, like how they conduct themselves. Are they somebody who spends a lot of time with other people? Do they mostly spend a lot of time alone? Are they extremely academic? Because the the art of teaching is about customizing, and the art of performing is about customizing, making an audience feel seen. So a lot of these same ideals are coming into play. And when it comes to the commonalities and what you start to recognize when you work with different people is that for the most part, people are very bad at seeing themselves clearly. And more often, it's they don't give themselves credit for what they do well. Like Mr. Jim Cunningham here knows he has a good voice because he does voiceover works. But you'd be surprised how many times I encounter somebody that has a voice of a similar caliber and has no idea. And I'm like, do you not know what you sound like? Or do you not know what it's like when you were on stage? Can you not see just how people, if you were up there with a dozen people, all eyes turn towards you? And sometimes you think, well, if someone's really good looking, well, sometimes that's it. But I keep track of people like, I don't know, Steve Buscemi would be a good example as an actor of like, that's not about good looking, but he is magnetic. You're watching and you're like, I like this guy. There's
Yeah.
just something about him. And so starting to keep track of someone's skill sets, remind them of what they do well, and keep them in their battlefield. This is you in the ongoing classes that I have with everybody of Stars quality, I will say this is not your battlefield. You are trying to fight on someone else's territory where you're always going to be second to what they are doing. You want to be here because this is what you do better than the vast majority of people, and draw your strength from that spot and make them come to you. That's the essence of it, to know your brand and to not let things in that aren't on brand.
That is another thing that he is very, very, and after having known and worked with him for a long time, very good at reminding me when I'm in situations. Earlier this year, I was in a situation where I was strolling at the same event as Michael Amar, who I had learned like 3 of the tricks I do on the reg from his VHS tapes when I was 15. And Tyler was able to tell me, look, these are his skill sets, but these are yours. And when you're there, remember to work your skill set and just take the fear completely away because, like he said, a different battlefield and helping you know your battlefield.
That's great. I like that analogy quite a bit. Um, Based on your experience, this is for both of you. Where do you see the art of magic headed in the coming years? Tyler, you start.
I feel like the technology that makes it so easy to connect us is also dividing us, in that more and more time is spent with a passive existence. We stare at a screen and it amuses us, but we don't feel seen. And magic offers the ultimate expression of feeling seen, at least in my mind, if you're doing it well, or if you're doing it the way that I like it the most. And so people are going to seek out magic in a way. I think it's going to become even more popular. And while certainly magic secrets are getting exposed left and right, I dare say that there'll be people who become less and less interested in the how, much like movies have the special effects. We all know there's special effects, but we care less about that. We just like watching somebody turn into a werewolf, and it just makes you feel all kinds of weird. That people will seek out magicians and live magicians. It will not be something where it happens through a screen, specifically because it reminds them of their humanity. And it'll be this event that binds you not only to the performer, but to the other people in the room. It's a shared experience. I can easily see that becoming a piece of the future.
Star, what about you? I totally agree with you. When magic is good, it can approach a religious experience just in terms of its sort of mind blowing, take you out of your adult brain and put you back into that childlike wonder. When it's done well, it's astoundingly enjoyable. Star, what about you? Where do you see magic going?
I agree with Tyler that there's such an emphasis on screens lately. And I thank YouTube and TikTok and everything for upping the popularity of magic. But I think people are craving in-person experiences. And with those in-person experiences becomes a longer form experience than just a visual, quick, fast 30 seconds on TikTok, where you are connected to it. Something that you say, something the spectator says directly affects something that happens with the trick. There's this great book called Super Communicators by Charles Duguid. He also wrote Power of Habit, I believe. Anyway, he says that the best conversation is where both people walk away feeling smarter, not necessarily because you learned something, but because something that you said may have contributed to the conversation going longer and bigger and better than it was. And I think if as people are learning, we need to step away from the screen, the more they can be in the moment and involve that and hit that button that isn't pressed when you're on a screen, or even, I mean, stage 2, but yeah, no, stage is the same, where you can still hit the button of people feeling seen and heard. We don't get that on screen.
There you go.
If I could,
Yeah.
just to build off of what was said there at the end, there's a handful of things that I'm always trying to draw things back when someone is performing, when I am performing. And one of my students long ago was a student of the tea ceremony. In fact, was so good that he was going to have his own, I don't know what it's called, house of tea, dojo, but he would be the person instructing. And he said, because I knew nothing of the tea ceremony, I'm just like, I don't know, it seems like this formalized thing where people get tea. Is that correct? And he says, well, yes, but you can think of the tea ceremony as the ultimate expression of customization. If you realize the person is left-handed, you put the cup down on the left side with the handle pointed to the left. If you see that the person has trouble walking, perhaps you adjust the seating or the path to where they'll sit and drink the tea. Any number of things that the person experiences this, hey, this was changed for me. That's what the tea ceremony is at its heart. And I think of magic as the same kind of dynamic where not only do I want to see my audience, of course, but I want them to feel seen. And I advocate for that. And I think Star is one of the very best at doing this. As she said earlier, she has great empathy. And so you can write a script and say words, but as you know, every audience is different and they'll land differently. And if your next response is the same, regardless of the audience in front of you, then they do not feel seen. They do not feel heard. We've all had examples of performers that they're going to say what they're going to say, absolutely regardless of what's going on in front of them. And the audience can feel that disconnect. So the more you can build in those moments where you read the room, comedians are fabulous at this. They say what they say until they cross a line. The audience goes, and you're like, oh, too far. Okay, fine. And then they walk it back. But now they know the room they have. Magicians don't tend to have this kind of exploration, with some notable exceptions, Star being one of them. And I think that is one of the best parts of the show.
Oscar Wilde said, tact is knowing how far to go when you know that you're going too far. And that's kind of summing up what he said about comedians. If they're reading the room, they're present, they're attuned to it.
I am memorizing this quote by Oscar Wilde, knowing how far to go when you know that you're going too far. I live my life right there. And so it's a fabulous quote. And what a terrific interview between two people who are working together. And for us to talk to, John, you constantly pick interesting angles and interesting people for us to talk to.
Well, that's because they're out there. And if you just keep your ear to the ground, I've said the first time we had Tyler on, the first time I saw him was in Cosmos Real Magic DVD set. And I said, is this the coolest guy in the world? Because he presents Dean Martin cool. He's actually a very down-to-earth person, but there is just a level of calm to the way that Tyler approaches things that we all could learn from. And it's like I said before we ran the interview there, as soon as Star said, I'm a professional magician, but I still have a teacher. And I would say he's maybe more of a coach than a teacher. I thought, oh, let's explore that because I know that he has that relationship with Nick DeFott. And Nick will always say, I worked this out with Tyler. Taylor and I worked this out. having that sort of relationship as a performing magician is vital. I know you have that relationship with Tyler.
Well, not just with Tyler, but I mean, with a lot of people, having attained a certain level, regardless of who you are, Bruce Springsteen is still looks to John Landau for feedback, for
Mhm.
information, for
Mhm.
corroboration of what he's thinking. It doesn't matter what level you attain. It's always valuable to have somebody that you can turn to and say, "What do you think about this? Where am I in the space-time continuum of this being presentable?" That's the bottom line. It's always good, and not just good, it's smart. It's smart to have people who are smarter than you or further along the line
Or
on the
just another
spectrum.
set of eyes that
Yeah,
are,
just another
yeah,
another valuable set of eyes, because
yeah,
sets of eyes aren't necessarily created equal.
yeah. And the other thing that I thought was so interesting was, well, the whole thing was interesting, but Starr's background in theater, in performing, and also the nuts and bolts of theater, very helpful if you're going to go on stage and perform, to just understand how to put something on a stage, how to, it doesn't just appear. You need to produce it. That's why they use the word produce. He produced a rabbit. Well, he not only produced it out of a hat, but he made sure the hat was the right hat, and the
Right.
rabbit was the right size, and the table was all set, and all that. And having that background, I mean, I think anyone who is interested in performing magic, it really can't hurt to also get yourself in a play.
Yeah, absolutely, and there are plenty of opportunities wherever you live, to get into a piece of theater or a community level, whatever level you are capable of getting into, you should do, because you will learn a whole lot about being on stage, presenting yourself on stage, what works, what doesn't work, and you've got a built-in director in a situation like that
Yep.
who can help you fine tune. And the other thing that I took from the interview that I didn't particularly think about until that was the idea of, hey, don't fight a battle on somebody else's turf. Stay in your lane, stay in your brand, and
Yeah.
do what you do. Don't feel the need to necessarily fight somebody like Michael Lamar on their own turf. That's not, you don't have to do that. You don't have to feel that sort of level of pain, of panic. Just don't go there. You do what you do, and they do what they do, and they're complementary. We're not in competition. Which that idea of finding my own battlefield and fighting my battles on that battlefield is a good one, and that's something that I got from that interview and from Tyler.
Yeah. He is an excellent teacher. He's an excellent coach. I think the things he said about, he's dealing with what is your brand? What are your strengths? That went back to our original interview when we talked to him about, as a teacher, figuring out, okay, how much can you learn at a time?
Right.
And how big of, how much do I need to turn the water on here on the hose?
That's right. What's your appetite? What have
Yeah.
you eaten, and how much of my okay, now I know what I'm doing here. Yeah, he's terrific, and not just a good teacher, he's a very, very good magician.
Yeah,
So,
there are those, the old expression, those who can't do teach. He can both do and teach.
yeah,
He's got that.
exactly.
He's
Yeah.
got that going for him.
And I could do neither. So, it's nice to have somebody like that on the program once in a while.
We should just do a whole season on building Jim's self-esteem.
Nah, I mostly my self-esteem is fine. Ask anybody. It I have no problem with self-esteem. But I do know what I'm good at and what I'm not good at. And so the idea that, hey, just because I don't have to, that's a very valuable piece of information that Tyler sort of put in a fortune cookie for me, or a nutshell.
boom, I got that now. Oh, that's great. So it's all
And you
good.
can always just put it in Clint Eastwood terms. A man's got to know
Man's
his
got to know
limitations.
his limitations.
Man's got to know his limitations.
Yeah, that's very nice.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, we've reached the I love that segment. I believe you go first.
Yeah, it's an odd. So it's me.
I want to hear what you love.
Yeah. So years and years ago, I was on a plane when they still showed movies and television shows on a plane for everybody, long before you could just sort of choose and pick, and it's right there at your seat. It used to be that it would be up on a screen, and you could either put your headphones in and listen to it, or disregard it. But it was there, just sort of all the time. And I had finished my book, and there was still 90 minutes left in the flight, and they were going to run a television show that I had not heard of. And I thought, oh, well, whatever it is, I'll watch it. And I put my headphones in, and I watched an episode of a television show that by the time it was over, I was riveted and had to know, this is phenomenal. I had tears in my eyes. It was a powerful, and it's the television show Sports Night, which was Aaron Sorkin's sort of entrance, if you will, into TV. And what an entrance it is. It's 2 short seasons, but it is filled with tremendous writing, as you might expect, but also really good acting, and a lot of people that you are going to recognize from huge projects and other things you've seen are ground floor performers in Sports Night. Josh Malina, who we love, Felicity Huffman, William H. Macy. And these are just, that's not even really the sort of 2 leads, both of whom have gone on to huge careers all on their own. It's a great series, and there are so many powerful moments in the show. And the crazy thing about it is, as a performer, or as somebody who does this sort of thing, Aaron Sorkin was writing the 2nd season of Sports Night while he was writing the 1st season of my absolute favorite television show ever, The West Wing.
Yep. He was
So
writing
he
it
was
on
doing-
weekends.
Yeah,
would
he was writing it on weekends, and then he'd go to the Sports Night set Monday and Tuesday and get them up to speed. And then he would leave on Wednesday at noon after lunch and go over to the other studio where he's going to finish writing an episode of The West Wing. I mean, it's phenomenal writing in both situations. My only regret is that there's not more of Sports Night. That it didn't have a chance to become part of our sort of national consciousness the way a Seinfeld or a Friends or something like that. It's smart stuff, it's funny stuff, and it's so well written and so well acted, and there are so many great moments that I lean on all the time. I was having lunch with some buddies, and we got talking about something, and I said, "Have you ever seen Sports Night?" "No, what's Sports Night?" So it's not even among my sort of inner circle, and these guys they're as far into my inner circle as you can be, John. You know where that inner circle is.
Yeah.
Neither of these guys had a frame of reference for Sports Night, and I was like, "Wow, you guys, take my word for it. Find this, watch this. It's 2 quick seasons, but they're terrific, and you'll love it."
Just to give you a taste of it, I will just drop in here. I don't normally announce it. I normally just cut to it, but let's drop in William H. Macy doing a speech from Sports Night.
You guys know who Philo Farnsworth was?
Philo Farnsworth.
Yeah.
And what's going on?
He invented television. I don't mean he invented television like Uncle Milty. I mean, he invented the television in a little house in Provo, Utah, at a time when the idea of transmitting moving pictures through the air would be like me saying I figured out a way to beam us aboard the Starship Enterprise. Yeah, look, he was a visionary. He died broke and without fanfare. The guy I really liked, though, was his brother-in-law, Cliff Gardner. He said, Philo, I know everyone thinks you're crazy, but I want to be a part of this. I don't have your head for science, so I'm not going to be able to help much with the design and the mechanics of the invention, but it sounds like you're going to need glass tubes.
JJ, I don't
You see,
think
Philo
he's-
was inventing the cathode receptor, and even though Cliff didn't know what that meant or how it worked, he'd seen Philo's drawing, and he knew he was going to need glass tubes. And since television hadn't been invented yet, it's not like you could get them at the local TV repair shop. I want to be a part of this, Cliff said. I don't have your head for science. How would it be if I were to teach myself to be a glass blower, and I could set up a little shop in the backyard, and I could make all the tubes you'll need for testing? There ought to be congressional medals for people like that.
Maybe so.
I've looked over the notes you've been giving over the last year or so, and I have to say they exhibit an almost total lack of understanding of how to get the best from talented people.
Excuse me, but
You said before that for whatever reason I seem to be able to exert some authority around here. I assure you, it's not because they like me. It's because they knew 2 minutes after I walked in the door, I'm someone who knows how to do something. I can help. I can make glass tubes. That's what they need. One last thing. The first and last decision-making authority on this show will rest with Isaac Jaffe until Isaac Jaffe says otherwise. And if you disrespect him in my presence again, I will rededicate the rest of my life to ruining the rest of yours. And if you think I'm just mouthing at you, you should ask around about me. I have absolutely no conscience about these things.
Sam, why did you bring us out here?
Because there's the exit. That's it. The meeting's over.
I just love that. And in the show notes, I'll put a link. I don't want to fill up the whole episode. I'll put a link if I can find it to Joshua Molina, who ended up on the West Wing and has done, of course, obviously other things besides that, but who lists himself on social media as the guy who ruined West Wing. He has a speech that he gives in his first episode where he's applying for a job. And it's a speech about his ability to write about sports. So I'll put a link to that in the show notes. But yeah, I highly recommend Sports Night. It is not only watchable, it is re-watchable and re-watchable and re-watchable.
Agreed. Yeah,
It's a lot of great
absolutely
ideas.
agreed. Yeah.
And speaking of things to rewatch, I would be surprised people haven't seen this movie, but I was reminded of it recently when a character realized that they couldn't get somewhere because they had the denomination of bills was too high to get into a cab. And I was reminded of Midnight Run.
I love to travel by train.
Oh, yeah? What do you think this is, a class trip?
A tough ex-cop.
Are you always this angry?
A sensitive criminal.
Oh, no, come on. Cigarettes are killers.
Why are we running away from the FBI? Because I gotta bring it back myself, otherwise I won't get my money.
They can't fly. They also suffer from acrophobia and claustrophobia.
I'll tell you what, if you don't cooperate, you're gonna suffer from fistophobia.
They're seeing America the hard way. At gunpoint.
What did you do before you did this? What qualified you for this?
Robert De Niro.
It is truly in your best interest to just relax.
I'm totally relaxed.
Charles Grodin.
$2, that's all you're gonna leave?
That's 15%.
That's 13%. These people depend on tips for a living.
From the director of Beverly Hills Cop, Midnight Run.
Excellent, excellent movie. If you've never seen it, run out and see it. If you have seen it, watch it again, and watch it again for the following. Charles Grodin, as an actor, is one of the best listeners ever in a movie. And just watch the scenes that he's in where he's not talking.
Yeah.
And what is he doing when he's not talking? In particular, there's a scene where Robert De Niro is meeting up with his estranged daughter. And I'm not sure Charles Grodin has any lines in that scene or not.
I don't think he does.
But he makes the scene. He makes what De Niro's doing work because of the way he was listening to it. It also has a great score. It's very funny. It has wonderful callbacks. It has some great improv stuff that Grodin did. He tells the story of how Robert De Niro, who was playing a skip chaser, someone who works for bail bondsman and tracks down people who have Skip Bayle, went on raids with Skip Jumpers and just went, did weeks and weeks of research. Whereas Charles Grodin, who plays an accountant, called his accountant from the comfort of his chair and talked to him for about 10 minutes. And that was all the research that he needed to do.
I got it.
Anyway, Midnight Run.
You know what? Here's what I'd do if I were you. If you're listening to this podcast, tonight, watch Midnight Run, and then tomorrow night, start Sports Night. They're half-hour episodes, but trust me when I say it's going to take you the night because you're not going to be able to stop after one. It's just you're going to blow through an entire season in an evening, and you're going to love it.
Thank you.
All right, let's just get down to business. Why don't we, huh? Last time, I think I read chapter 2, so before I launch into chapter 3, give us just the quick recap as you do, John, of chapter 2.
We're early on in the book, but we already have a dead body. Oscar is pronounced dead by Miss Hess, who appears to be something of a housekeeper assistant for Lawrence Baxter. We meet some of the other magicians who are part of his gang, Angus Bishop and Boris and Davis DeVries. Anyway, a bunch of other people, Davis in particular being there because he's going to be unveiling a new illusion called the Catherine Wheel. Harry is considered a flight risk and can't get out of jail. And so Lawrence Baxter arrives with his barrister and the barrister goes in to try to help Harry. Eli finally gets in to see him, and Harry says, if you're going to go see McHugh, wear comfortable shoes, and that takes us right into chapter 3.
Chapter 3. Although Henry McHugh was not visible when we stepped out of the Tower Hill tube station, the size of the crowd milling about assured me immediately that my limited understanding of the London Underground system had brought us to the correct location. "Are all these people here for a Jack the Ripper walk?" Megan said, scanning the swarm of tourists of all shapes and sizes. "No, they're here for the best Jack the Ripper walk," I corrected. "Henry McHugh is considered to be one of the top living experts on the killings. Ripper walks are available every night of the week from lots of companies, but McHugh only does his on Sunday nights, when he's in town, and feels like doing it." "What makes him the expert?" Megan asked as we snaked our way through the throng to pay. "I mean, was he on the case during the murders?" I stopped and gave her a long look, checking to see if she was just pulling my leg. "Megan, the Jack the Ripper murders took place in 1888, I said. "Do you know how old that would make him?" "I get fuzzy on dates," she said with a shrug, and we continued toward the front of the crowd as I pulled my wallet out of the relative safety of my front pocket and sorted through the unfamiliar bills. 20 pounds, and 10 minutes later, we were on the move, with the mob straining to hear McHugh's voice above the general din produced by a large, multilingual crowd moving through the cobblestone streets of London's East End. Twice I had nearly gotten close enough to wave and get his attention, but with no success either time. The people treated him like he was a superstar, with fans quickly moving in for one-on-one questions each time he finished his short Ripper recitation and began the brief stroll to the next location. The crowd's reaction to him was, I realized, the same way magicians would approach my Uncle Harry. Perhaps this bizarre form of celebrity was what had bound the two men together as close friends. I had met Henry McHugh a handful of times during my life. The most recent encounter had been at my Aunt Alice's funeral, which he had traveled from London to attend. I knew long trips like that were becoming fewer and fewer for him, but I also got the sense this singular event was one he simply felt he could not miss. I still remembered my uncle's look of surprise and relief when McHugh walked into the memorial service. Harry had not cried until that point, but seeing his old friend seemed to offer the permission he had been waiting for. To be honest, I still teared up when I thought about it. While I pondered his relationship with Harry during the walking segments, McHugh had my complete attention each time he stopped and addressed the crowd on the topic of Jack the Ripper. Virtually all the original murder sites had changed radically over the years, so it required his oratory skills to bring each location to life once again. He was certainly up for the challenge, weaving a story about life in London's East End, which covered more than just the lurid details of the murders, although there was no shortage of gore in the retelling. But he also tied in the socio-economic issues of the time, along with the racial and ethnic stereotypes that permeated the investigation of the crimes. From time to time, he would mention this suspect or that, outlining quick details on what actions of theirs had added them to the list of potential suspects as one of the world's most infamous serial killers. And then, just as quickly, he would demolish the argument with some well-researched facts. After having done this with several of the best-known subjects, a frustrated listener finally yelled from the crowd, "Well, if it wasn't him, who do you think did it, for Pete's sake?" McHugh smiled at the question, which I was sure he'd been asked about as many times as I asked someone to take a card. He waited until the crowd had stopped laughing and then gave his well-practiced response. He didn't say it loudly, but he knew at that moment everyone could hear him. "I believe he was a local man," McHugh said, with just the trace of a smile. "And he didn't like prostitutes." "Just how many suspects are there in this Jack the Ripper thing?" Megan whispered after McHugh had introduced and shot down another 2 possibilities. "I'm not even sure McHugh could give you a number," I said, taking her arm so we weren't inadvertently separated by the moving crowd. "Everyone has their favorite. In fact, the only time I can remember my Aunt Alice and Uncle Harry having an actual fight was on this very topic. I never met your Aunt Alice, but the way Harry talks about her, I can't imagine the two of them ever fighting. And they hardly ever did. But one of Alice's favorite mystery writers wrote a book, a non-fiction thing about the murders, suggesting a new and unlikely suspect. And Alice made the mistake of telling Harry she thought the author got it right on the nose. And that's how she put it, I added, smiling at the memory. She got it right on the nose. And Harry didn't share this view? Well, I said, a lot of people didn't share that view, but Harry was the only one of them who was living with Alice. The two of them eventually agreed not to talk about it, but I know it irked both of them to the end. We increased our pace to catch up with the crowd. "What will be the one thing that bugs the two of us till the end of time?" she asked, looking up and smiling at me. I stopped and kissed her on the forehead. "I don't know, but I can't wait to find out," I said as we rounded a corner and rejoined the group. "In the early morning hours of Sunday, September 30th, McHugh was saying to the rapt crowd, mere minutes after the interrupted murder of Elizabeth Stride, our killer struck again, here in Mitre Square, claiming the life of Catherine Edders, right here, on these very cobblestones upon which we stand." The old guy really had a way of spinning a story, and the added detail about standing on the same cobblestones from 1888 sent a chill up my spine. The way Megan squeezed my hand suggested this reaction was not unique to me. "At approximately 1:45 a.m., when P.C. Edward Watkins discovered the body, he literally stumbled upon a bloody mess. The killer had cut the poor unfortunate woman from her breastbone all the way down to her... Oh, my stars and garters! Is that Eli Marks?" I was surprised, as one would be, to hear my name in this context, and realized McHugh must have finally spotted me in the crowd. "My goodness, it is Eli. Hello, old boy. Good to see you. We will talk anon, won't we?" With that, he gave me a cheerful wave and then returned to his description of the crime scene, including what sounded like a very complete listing of the internal organs that had been appropriated and spirited away as part of the bloody act. Once the conclusion of the walk had been reached, McHugh was surrounded by those attendees who wanted to ask just one more question, offer one more possible suspect theory, or pose for a selfie with him. He was kind and patient with one and all, so Megan and I stood quietly off to the side awaiting our opportunity. Seeing there appeared to be no end in sight, he waved me over. "This won't take as long as it looks," he said, stepping toward me and lowering his voice. "Why don't you grab a table at the pub, and I will join you presently." I glanced across the street at the pub called the 10 Bells and then turned back to him. "Sure thing," I said. "We'll wait for you there." "Brilliant. I can't wait to find out what our friend Harry has been up to." Megan and I had no trouble snagging a table in the rustic old pub, but I soon realized an actual conversation with McHugh was still at least a few minutes away. A mini mob of acolytes followed him into the bar in order to buy a copy of his book and get it autographed. This must have been a regular occurrence, for as soon as he entered, one of the large barmen pulled a cardboard box out from under the counter and set it by McHugh's feet at the table we had secured. "Back in the day," he said as he settled in and started pulling fresh copies of the Jack the Ripper omnibus out of the box, "I would carry a supply of the books with me. But with later editions getting bulkier and me getting, well, bulkier as well, it seemed a prudent solution to strike a bargain with the pub owner. He stocks the books, and we split the take. A fair arrangement all around, don't you think?" As I was coming to learn, about 60% of British questions are rhetorical. Figuring this one fell into that majority, I took drink orders and headed to the bar, while McHugh signed books and fielded compliments on his oratory and writing skills. By the time I returned with 3 ales, the crowd had dwindled to McHugh, Megan, and one last devotee who was fanning the dying flames of his argument. McHugh smiled patiently at the young man. "To me," the fellow concluded breathlessly, "the evidence is irrefutable." "Well, sorry to be the one to refute it then, old boy, but prison records clearly place our friend behind bars well before and well after the deaths of the canonical 5, McHugh said with more patience than I might have mustered. "To the best of my knowledge, prisons didn't even offer conjugal visits at the time, let alone day passes to commit the odd serial killing." "Well, then, I guess we'll have to agree to disagree," the fellow said. "The story of my life," McHugh replied with a smile, finishing up his autographing duties as he handed the signed book to the young man who nodded, tipped his cap, and scurried out of the bar. "Do you ever get tired of having the same arguments over and over?" I asked as I set the ale in front of him. "Hardly. After all, I was married for over 40 years, he said, bringing the glass to his lips and taking a long sip. He sat back and let out a deep, satisfied sigh. "To the perfect drink, at the perfect time, in the perfect place, with the perfect companions," he toasted before taking another long sip. Once sated, he leaned forward. "So, tell me of magical Minneapolis and the musings of our mutual mystical friend, Harry Marks." The whole story took longer to recount than I had expected, and throughout the telling, McHugh's countenance shifted continually, reacting to each twist and turn of Harry's first 2 days in London. He offered no interruptions or asides, just a steady stream of "my my's" and "good heavens" as I unfolded the tale. I finished by recounting my conversation with Harry in the jail's visiting booth and his admonition to pull McHugh into the narrative. "Just so," McHugh said once I had finished. "Although, due to my retired status, I'm not entirely certain what help I can provide, but my years in the service might, at the very least, help grease some wheels, if that is in fact the expression." I nodded and was about to continue, but Megan jumped in before I could form my first question. "How long have you been retired?" she asked. McHugh considered the inquiry. "Officially, I handed in my badge over 15 years ago," he said, "due to injuries sustained while off duty. But I have been asked to consult on a number of cases in the intervening years," he added, taking another sip of his ale. It was then I remembered the story, as recounted to me by Uncle Harry. McHugh and his wife had been mugged late one evening on the way home from the theater. Outnumbered and wishing to keep his wife out of harm's way, McHugh wisely handed over all their valuables when requested to do so, but it was to no avail, as the muggers took shots at the couple as they departed. McHugh survived, a nearly imperceptible limp, the only reminder of the crime. His wife hadn't been so lucky. With little to occupy his time, he took any and all requests to speak on the Jack the Ripper case, bringing him to the States more than ever before. And with most of those trips came a swing through Minneapolis to see his old pal, Harry Marks.
So, they're going before the magistrate in the morning, you say?
He mused, stroking his chin.
I suspect I can make a phone call or two, which might minimize Harry's future incarceration, and, if we're lucky, forestall any long-term confinement on his part.
Before offering any details on this plan, McHugh held up an empty mug, which was my cue it was time to make another trip to the bar. Less than 12 hours later, Megan and I found ourselves seated in another pub, this one around the corner from the police station Uncle Harry had been calling home since Saturday night. After meeting us out on the street, McHugh had settled us into the warm establishment and gone off to, in his casual phraseology,
have a quick chat with a few lads.
A text moments later from Lawrence Baxter informed me that he, too, was at the station pulling whatever strings he could. I passed this information along to Megan, and we agreed it was looking like Harry had a formidable team on his side. The pub served breakfast, but we had already grabbed a bite at our hotel, which we had both taken to referring to as Faulty Towers, although in retrospect I think Megan thought the title was more of a joke than I did. I had steered clear of the traditional English breakfast that time around in favor of cold toast and coffee, while Megan availed herself to the porridge, which she proclaimed far superior to the oatmeal at home. I suggested the bar wasn't set particularly high for that contest, but she insisted I sample a bite, and I was forced to agree with her assessment. They may have conceded the Revolutionary War, but when it came to hot oats for breakfast, the British were the clear winners. Many of the same characters we had seen the day before put in another appearance. The Harry Potter kid was bratty as ever. The Russian grandmother repeated her admonition of "Edidadushki" to her table mates as they squirreled away bits of food for Pop-Pop. And then a couple of Americans came in complaining about the low thread count in the sheets and its impact on their delicate flesh, which we took as our cue it was time to head out and meet McHugh.
Enter a free man.
We turned to see Lawrence Baxter, looking insanely dapper for such an early hour, holding the pub's door open wide. He gestured expansively as Harry entered, squinting at the sudden change in illumination. He appeared bleary and out of place in his rumpled tux, his hair nearly as disheveled as the rest of him. Baxter patted him warmly on the back and directed him toward our table, nearly slamming the door shut on McHugh, who had followed the two magicians in. Megan quickly jumped up and met Harry at the halfway point, pulling him in for a long, warm hug. "Oh, Harry, we were so worried for you."
"You and me both, my dear,"
Harry said, his voice raspy and strained.
"You and me both. Have you talked to Franny?"
"We called her last night after we met up with McHugh," I said as I pulled out a chair for him. Megan brought her up to date. "She said she was going to hop on a plane," Megan added. Harry immediately shook his head, holding up a hand.
No, Franny hates to fly. She just hates it,"
he said. "Not to worry," I said, patting his arm. "We talked her out of it. She's going to sit tight until we hear more."
"Oh, thank goodness," he said, visibly relieved. "She didn't want me to take this trip. I should have listened to her."
"I think we've turned a corner," Lawrence Baxter said as he joined us. In his scant moments in the bar, he had managed to flag down one of the waitstaff and place an order. Now he silently directed the waitress as she carefully placed a cup of tea in front of Harry. Baxter nodded his approval as she smiled shyly at him and scurried away. Such is the power of celebrity, I thought. Perhaps, McHugh said as he joined us. He pulled out a chair and lowered himself down heavily. But I don't think we're entirely out of the woods just yet. He glanced over at the tea Harry had begun to sip, then looked up at Baxter. Brilliant. Any chance you could grab a cup for me as well? The expression on Baxter's face suggested it had been quite a while, if ever, since someone had asked him to serve them tea. He looked around, but no help was in sight. He pursed his lips for a moment, nodded, and then turned and headed back to the bar. What do you mean, I asked, about not being out of the woods? Well, there's no question the case against Harry is circumstantial, but the problem is that the circumstances themselves are extraordinary, McHugh began. He had means, he had opportunity, only the motive is missing. But to be candid, I've seen cases where the best of three was all that was required to tip the balance, and not, I'm sad to say, in the direction we would prefer. The thing is, Harry said quietly, if they look back far enough, they could find a motive. He could see the shocked reactions on our faces. Not a strong motive, mind you, but it's there, if they were to dig. What possible reason could you have to kill Oscar Corhonen? I said. As you might imagine, I've had a lot of time to think since Saturday night, he said slowly, and something did occur to me. Been years, a lot of years. It had to do with the Marks Pass. Oh, the Marks Pass, Lawrence Baxter said as he returned, placing a cup of tea in front of McHugh. He did it so carelessly I was surprised he didn't miss the table and have it land in McHugh's lap. I had forgotten about that. Quite the brouhaha at the time, wasn't it? McHugh righted the tea in its saucer. What is this Marks Pass? He asked, turning to Harry. It sounds like something your pioneers went through on their way to the California gold rush. It's a card move I did some work on. Means of getting a card from any location in the deck to the top, Harry said quietly. It's really just a refinement based on the Herman Pass. Don't downplay it, Baxter said, leaning in. It was and is quite elegant, and less knacky than Herman. It is pretty slick, I agreed. Plus, you could do it one-handed. And what does this Marks Pass have to do with Oscar Corhonen? McHugh said, trying to get the conversation back on track. Other than the fact he possessed, as I gather, only one hand. Back in the 70s, Harry said, Oscar produced a training video for magicians. Interesting. McHugh had taken a small pad from his pocket, and he began to take notes. Are there a significant number of one-armed magicians in need of training? Harry shook his head. It was really about looking at old tricks in new ways, which, as you can imagine, one is forced to do if you have half as many hands as the average magician. There was some really fine thinking in the video, out-of-the-box stuff, as they say. First rate, Baxter agreed. I don't think I had ever actually watched the tape, but as the third magician at the table, I felt obliged to nod along in order to complete the trifecta. So I did, adding an ineffectual good stuff to the conversation to confirm my contribution. Anyway, Harry continued, in the tape, he demonstrated the Marks Pass without any accreditation. Not a word, Baxter said bitterly. Not a word in the demonstration itself, nothing in the credits, it wasn't mentioned on the box. Just shameful, really. McHugh looked at the two old magicians, a puzzled expression on his face. So you're saying he stole a move of yours and profited from it? That's your motive for killing him? Oh, no, he didn't steal it, didn't claim it as his own, Harry said quickly. And he certainly didn't profit from it. I mean, not in any significant way. No, a video like that, I can't imagine it selling particularly well, can you? Baxter said to Harry, and they both agreed. It probably hadn't. McHugh looked like he was getting a tad frustrated.
Then what's the difficulty?
Baxter and Harry regarded him and then each other. Baxter turned back to McHugh.
He didn't credit the move,
he said slowly, as if to a child.
That's one of the worst things you can do in the magic community, Harry explained. We're very big on giving credit where it's due. It's all about crediting your sources.
Indeed, Baxter added quickly, in our world, if you credit properly, you can get away with murder. He instantly realized the implications of this unfortunate turn of phrase. That's not to say anyone ever does, of course. Murder someone, I mean.
No, of course not,
McHugh said, closing his notebook. He took a sip of tea and settled back into his chair.
Thank you for the information. Regardless of its implications at the time, though, I doubt that particular incident will loom large in the prosecutor's case.
So what happens next? I asked, hoping to steer the conversation away from Harry's possible motives for killing Oscar.
We'll follow 2 tracks, really,
he said, folding his hands across his chest.
Right now, this murder investigation is shining a very bright light in a very dark room. Currently, that light is focused solely on Harry. I'd like to see the lads on the police force widen the beam a bit, as it were.
To consider other suspects, I suggested, thinking of 1 or 2 names I could add to their list. Davis DeVries had inside knowledge of how the murderous chair had worked, for instance. McHugh snorted.
They are going to have to look for other suspects before they consider others, and I see precious little evidence they're even doing that. Right now, Harry is the shining object that has their full attention. My next step will be to have a conversation with the chief inspector and remind him or her of all the points that don't count against our Harry as their prime suspect.
And those points are? Baxter said as he waved at a passing waitress and indicated Harry's tea needed a refill. McHugh held his cup up as well, but the action was either ignored or unseen by Baxter.
Well, in addition to the dearth of motive on Harry's part, there is also the question of timing. He had hardly been in the country 3 hours when the murder occurred, and of course there is the issue of the chair. A unique item, that one, and certainly not something Harry had packed in his carry-on bag.
No, that chair has been in use for years at the Magic Circle, Baxter said. It's never given us any trouble in the past. McHugh arched an eyebrow at this.
No, I suppose it hasn't.
He consulted his notes, flipping back a couple of pages.
They tell me the mechanism appears to have been inside it for years, but that it was possibly recently oiled and adapted to hold the knife. Apparently, it was triggered when the subject sat in the chair. Any idea what its previous purpose might have been?
Harry and Baxter exchanged a look.
Probably a clever way to deliver a load of some kind to the magician, Harry said.
Or produce an object quickly, out of thin air, as it were, Baxter added. Davis DeVries might have some thoughts on that, I suggested. McHugh clucked his tongue thoughtfully at this and made a quick note, then flipped to the next page in his small notebook.
Well, we got Harry out on bail. That's a good first step. My guess is they will hold his passport until they are sufficiently persuaded he had no involvement in the case.
How long will that be? Harry asked. I could tell he was worrying about the impact his absence would have on Franny back home. Although not yet newlyweds, the pair acted like a long-married couple and had become virtually inseparable over the last year or so.
Probably a few days, McHugh said. At most, a fortnight.
Oh, my, where will I stay for that long? Harry said, setting down his teacup and patting his pockets.
I had a reservation for Saturday night at the Wesley Hotel by the Magic Circle, but I have clearly lost it by now, being Monday and all.
You can always stay at our hotel, Megan offered brightly. Before I could verbalize a response to the contrary, Lawrence Baxter slapped the table with his hand. "Nonsense," he said. "You must stay at my house. I have a little place out on the heath. In fact, you all must come." He scanned the group and then added, "I mean the visitors, the Americans." McHugh smiled wryly and nodded. "Yes, of course, obviously." Baxter's tone left little doubt there was to be no argument on the subject. I could tell Megan was disappointed at the prospect of leaving our own version of Faulty Towers. She glanced at me, and I did my best to look sad. I'm pretty sure she saw right through my performance, and I was reminded of an expression Harry used to say to me when I was a teenager. "You look like an undertaker trying to look sad at a $30,000 funeral," he would say. I glanced back at Megan and doubled my efforts, trying to look twice as disappointed. Deep down, of course, I knew neither one of us was buying it.
Okay, well, there's a lot of we can talk about from that chapter. We can talk about
Absolutely.
the Ripper Walk, which is really based entirely on Don Rumbelow's Ripper Walk. Going to the Ten Bells pub, which is what Rumbelow used to do. I don't know if they still do that now.
I gotta believe. I don't know why you wouldn't. If you were doing that walk, I don't know why you wouldn't end up at the Ten Bells pub. And speaking of I love that's, here's one that both John and I love. If you are in London for any reason, make sure, I don't think Mr. Rumbelow is still giving that walk, but that walk is still being given through a company called London Walks.
Except no substitutes. There are others around there that will try to fool you into thinking they're London Walks when you show up. They're not. If they're not holding the London Walks pamphlet, holding it up and saying, "I am London Walks," they're the ones to go with.
I feel like now I burned a London Walks as and I love that, but I do love it. Whenever I go, whenever I'm fortunate enough to get to London, the first thing I do before I go is go to that London Walks website and find out what they're going to be offering while I'm there, so that I can say, you know, and it doesn't matter what you're interested in. Jack the Ripper, ghosts, architecture, Shakespeare, Dickens, the Beatles, Harry Potter, World War II. Whatever you're interested in, they're gonna have a walk, and you're gonna be taken around London by a professional, in large part, a professional actor who has is a tour guide like you will not believe. Super great, and that Donald Rumbelow, Jack the Ripper walk. It's so spooky and so fun and so tragic in so many ways. But
Yeah. Anyway, what else did we learn? We learned that a little fun note here that McHugh's first name is Henry McHugh. He will be referred to as McHugh throughout the story just because I can't have a Henry and a Harry. And
be too much for the narrator.
yeah, didn't realize when I wrote The Ripperologist that he'd be coming into a book with someone named Harry. So there's that. And just the sort of fun at the end of the chapter about Eli not wanting to stay at that hotel and Megan loving Faulty Tower style hotels.
That's your love right there, isn't it?
It is, yes.
That's
Yes, it is.
life imitating art, art imitating life, I guess. I had a question that kind of ricocheted off my head. Is The Ripperologist available as an audiobook?
It is. It was recorded by Steve Hendrickson. And
Nobody better. He's really great.
he is very good. He did The Ripperologist and he did Greyhound of the Baskervilles.
Yeah.
Both those are available wherever you get audiobooks. He did a very, very nice job.
If you're enjoying the Eli Mark series, you're going to enjoy The Ripperologist, and now they have crossed over into each other's world. So
They have, although they did sort of cross over in The Miser's Dream, in that the mystery author there, his ex-wife, is the mystery author from The Ripperologists. It was not made overt, but when you read The Ripperologist, you'll understand that her ex-husband is also a mystery writer. Anyway.
And as good as the book is, Steve Hendrickson is a tremendous narrator. He's a brilliant actor and a tremendous narrator. So my recommendation would be get that thing on the Audible and just listen and listen and listen, and you'll be happy you did.
Perfect. All right, that's it for episode 503. Next time, we're going to listen to chapter 4 of Linking Rings, and they're going to revisit some important thoughts from a very early guest, the late Amazing Kreskin.
Oh, I love it. I'll be there.
Yes, he had some fascinating things to say about getting the most out of a mistake, I guess is what you'd say. And he was a he was a fun conversation. I'll have a link in the show notes next time for his full conversation, but we'll just listen to one little snippet. But that's next time, chapter 4 of the Linking Rings, and a short bit from the amazing Kreskin.
Take care, everybody.
Bye-bye.
This has been Behind the Page, the Eli Marks podcast, with your hosts, John Gaspard and Jim Cunningham. Produced by Alberts Bridge Books at Grass Lake Studios. Find this podcast and all the books in the Eli Marks series at elimarksmysteries.com. That's ELIMARKS Mysteries.com. And thanks for listening.